Welcome to an all-new episode of the McFuture podcast. I'm Steve Faktor, and today I am taking on Martin Luther King. I saw this quote, and I'm going to read it to you. In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. That got me thinking, are friends the same thing as allies? Because we kind of use them interchangeably. And then there's a cultural thing that's happening now that is causing those definitions to diverge even further. I've already done an episode on friendship. So now I am your friendship yogi, Frogi. Let me start from the end and then work our way backwards. My conclusions are friends are not the same thing as allies, and allies are not the same thing as friends. Both are extremely rare, and there's an entire industry built around making you think that they're not. And finally, there's only one kind of ally that still matters in our society. Most of us hear the word ally when it comes to countries. It's not the same thing as individuals. In the 1960s, the French president, Charles de Gaulle, he said, France has no friends, only interests. Not only does that hold true today, but it applies to every single country on earth. Countries don't play golf. Countries don't get smashed at Smash Mouth concerts. Countries don't split that odd dumpling at that spiteful restaurant that serves two of you 5 dumplings and someone's got to do the due diligence of cutting that last one. Nations cannot be friends. Allies are the best that they can hope for. And even that relationship is tenuous. Look at what happened with Trump and his America First policy, as well as how botched Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan was. Our allies take the hint. When they see that happening, they don't want to be the ones left clinging to the wing of the escape jet. They want to be inside of the jet. And now you see our alliances falling apart. So France is pushing Europe for a huge military buildup. And Japan just authorized the biggest defense budget in the history of Japan since that one little incident. Japan, which saw the worst ravages of war, is now building up its military. So unreliable allies push countries towards either new allies or self-reliance. And skittishness is really that one trait that both nations and individuals hold in common. And maybe at some point I'll get into nations in a future episode. But today, let's focus on people. First, let's define the terms. And I thought that I'd have to come up with my own definitions, but I went to dictionary.com because, it's the most obvious place. And I think it's a good starting point. So the definition of friend on dictionary.com, a person attached to another by feelings of affection or personal regard. And their definition of ally is a person, group, or nation that is associated with another or others for some common cause or purpose. So there are some implicit and explicit differences between those two things. What's explicit is where the loyalties lie. A friend's loyalties are, quote, attached to another person. Allies aren't bonded to each other. They're bonded to a common cause or purpose. That's a very, very different bonding. And if that cause vanishes or an ally abandons the cause, it ends the alliance. We've seen that throughout history with religion, with apostates. So apostates are people who leave the faith. They get excommunicated if they're lucky. They get dismembered or murdered or worse if they draw the fundamentalist card, end up in the wrong faith. Bonds of faith, in those cases, they supersede friendship, blood, marriage, any other type of relationship. And we've seen that with Hitler's Germany. We've seen that with Stalin's Russia, and we even got a glimpse of it through McCarthy's America, where people will turn on their friends for a cause. It's the same today in North Korea, where treachery is the least of your problems. You are probably eating rats if you're lucky. You might be eating your friends, according to Naomi Park, I think is her name, who is a dissident from North Korea. At least that's the story she tells. And China has an entire social network built up around this, where you can root out jihadist. Okay, that looks much better in print because it's Xi as the president, XI. Anyway, disloyalty will lose you points. It is the worst rewards program ever invented that has never been implemented by American Express. You can report your friends from the comfort of your Huawei phone. You don't even have to do it because just by being in proximity of each other, and if one person has a low score, your score goes down. That's how loyalty to causes and to nations can work. So in these countries, these bonds of nationalism hold when bonds of friendship wither. Never underestimate a person's hunger for purpose and belonging and their fear of losing both. We're also starting to see some of this kind of fervor right here in the US with wokeism and cancel culture and intersectionality and cults of personality like Trump, either for Trump or against Trump. People are forging tribal alliances. These are not friendships. This is tribal. And you could tell which bonds are stronger by which ones are breaking. How many people have broken up friendships or stopped talking to family members based on their politics? So clearly, the alliances are winning in a lot of cases. I know people who just won't talk to other people that disagree with them politically. We are in this transition towards dogmas that are obliterating friendships and replacing them with alliances. Alliances based on very strange loyalties, to be honest with you. What's even more interesting is what's implicit in all this. There is no such thing as an ally without sacrifice. And it's not sacrifice for you, it's sacrifice for the cause. And there's a pretty big range. Some people might die for a cause, and some might tweet about it. That's the difference between eating steak and being steak. And you can look at someone's history to see, maybe there's some clues as to how loyal they've been, but you really won't know for sure until that dinner bell rings. And when you start feeling that A1 steak sauce dripping down your body, you know. And unfortunately, then it's too late. Allyship, which is a horrible word, but being an ally is also full of false indicators. Because in a lot of cases, when a sacrifice also benefits your ally, it's not really a sacrifice, it's a calculated risk. This is extremely common in work environments with coworkers and bosses. You might have someone who supports you in getting a budget for a risky project, for example. But are they doing it because it's the right thing to do for the company? Or are they doing it because there's something in it for them, a promotion, a bonus, or some sort of plum gig inside the company? That's fine if you accept that's what this is. But it can be crushing when the next battle comes along and you look to your side and that person's nowhere to be found because they weren't there for doing the right thing. They were doing the right thing for themselves and they sent you a false signal. So set expectations accordingly. Now, friends are very different. You expect them to be there for you emotionally, sometimes financially, but you don't expect them to take up your causes or fight your battles. Your life's journey is your own. And it's unrealistic for them to take those things up because they have their own path to follow. For example, I consider people who listen to this show and subscribe on Patreon, patreon.com/McFuture. I consider them allies. These are people who are helping me grow my voice and hopefully getting to more people. They're not going to slay my enemies in cold blood as much as I might enjoy that, but I also am not going on vacation with them. By the same token, with my friends, I don't really expect them to love the things I do because they might just not be into it. They might be into something else. It's great if they support the show, if they're fans, but I don't hold grudges against them if they're not. You draw those lines very differently, or at least I tried to. So in the last episode that I did on friendship, I talked about how strong bonds of mutual dependence between friends were breaking down and being replaced by bonds of interest. Hey, we're into sushi, let's go out for sushi, that sort of thing. But it's not just friendships. All strong bonds are breaking down. So if you look at the breakdown in traditional religion, communities, families, fewer people are having those. That opens the door to a lot of pseudo religions or weaker communities, things like Bitcoin and wokeism and psychedelics and meditation and politics. I talked about it in an episode called The Future is Belief. And your bond to some of those communities or those pseudo religions are going to be stronger than the bonds you have to others who are just friends. So you see a replacement happening where more and more of your relationships are allyships. Now, these bonds to our allies are only stronger by comparison. So all these people yelling, promote women, elevate Latinx voices. I'm like, you don't even know what Latinx is. And Latinos definitely don't know what the hell it is because you made it up 7 seconds ago. None of these people are sacrificing anything. They're not leaving their jobs going, oh my God, how dare I have this seat when a Latinx is sitting right over there? And the other person like, who are you calling a Latinx? I don't know what you're talking about. Anyway, they're not sacrificing anything. They're going to post a black square from their parents' vacation home in New Hampshire, but that's about it. These are not real allies. These are posers. I mean, hell, I'm pretending I'm in Phoenix right now just so I don't have to help my cousin move. That's the reality. That's what we are. Look in the mirror. Look in the mirror. You'll see a pretty crappy ally. No one's elevating anything unless it elevates them too. And it all goes back to sacrifice. We are so lucky to live in a time where so little of it is required. We have so few existential threats that loyalties rarely get tested. But I suspect when push comes to shove, most of our new allies aren't even going to wait for the push. They'll be gone. And you're like, hey, wait a minute, no one even got pushed. If we get fired or canceled or somehow impaired, good luck finding who's going to put their own resources, their own reputation, their own career on the line to defend us. Maybe someone who's codependent on us, but that's about it. Don't expect much. So our allies are very much like our new faiths, recreational. Now, there's also a flip side to sacrifice, and that's reciprocity. I'm going to talk about that in next week's episode. In fact, that episode is going to be up for patrons at patreon.com/McFuture in the next day or so. Now, our hunger for purpose that all of these recreational faiths are trying to fill is ripe for opportunism. Let me introduce you to the ally industrial complex. It just takes a smattering of tweets from some anonymous losers to scare a corporation, to fake a movement, or sack a scapegoat. Even fake allies produce real results in the real world. Now, if only this power could be harnessed. Well, it has. We're in a grifter renaissance where every single tweet is a tiny gust of wind that powers the ship of a bunch of grifters and trainers and activists and phonies and talking heads and politicians who all want to reach the shores of power, fame, influence, and money. That's all that's happening. All of these people are grifters, fueled by this paper tiger of Twitter. It's a tiny little thing this big, but you shine a light on it from the right angle, and it looks gigantic on the wall as a shadow, and it's destroying our society. But even tweets need causes. And in the absence of existential ones, We replace them with performative ones, where you take a bunch of grievances and gripes and Trump tweets and you mush them together into something that looks like a cause. And the more lofty the demands for that cause, the more outraged they'll be when those demands inevitably are not met, because they can't be. They're usually insane or way, way disproportionate to the problem. So that fuels even more outrage, because how dare you not meet our demands, which were insane to begin with? Steven Pinker, the professor who writes about how much better off we are today than we have been even in the last 50 or 100 years, his head would explode trying to explain how miraculous these times are. In fact, his head probably is exploding right now. We are seeing unbelievable reduction in war, in disease, in poverty. But no one cares, because these dinghies of discontent have been built, and they will reach shore one way or another. And the more of these causes there are, the more incoherent the discontent. You see all of these hypocrisies smashing into each other like rugrats on meth. Science and conspiracies are denounced based on what channel they're on. Some identities flow like rivers, and others are frozen in granite for eternity. And a stranger gets to decide which is which. And trust in government is equally fluid, depending on what side you're on. And inconvenient histories are either rewritten or erased. And female empowerment is a huge priority, but only in countries that have a dollop of oil. Coincidence? Maybe. Even math is guilty of something, and I have no idea what. And groups that invite you to stand with them for one cause kick your ass out for another. Asians are people of color when it's convenient. And then when there are too many of them in gifted high schools, you're not POC anymore. These are all the hypocrisies that are colliding in our society. And it's important that we start calling them out. Yes, my friends, we've become imbeciles, puppets for profiteers, patsies for power seekers, unworthy allies. And yet the ally industrial complex perseveres, strange, incoherent, manipulative, fueled by that which destroys us. Its goals are not ours. But it's not too late. There are just causes and worthy allies, but they demand reason, not ideology. And our actions have to be moral and principled, not chaotic and hypocritical. And maybe we start by asking, well, what cause would we, I almost said die for, but not really die for, but what cause would we sacrifice anything meaningful, a year's worth of salary for example? I discussed mine on a previous episode called 99 Racists. I strongly recommend it. It's one of my favorites. But think about yours. What would your sacrifice be? And then maybe we start gravitating to things that matter. Let's talk about the last part, the final alliance. There's only one consistent source left for worthy allies: our genitals. That's right. Family is the last bastion of strong bonds and reliable allies. No one else will help you find a job or protect you from bullies or take you in after a bad breakup or help pay for rehab or watch your kids the way family will. It's the best hybrid between friend and ally in the best possible sense of both words. And what's ironic is if we got family right, all of these other recreational causes would start to vanish. And you could see this in practice. Pick a day when people are burning down Targets and rioting and no one's calling it a riot, and just start driving. And eventually there'll be fewer flaming big box retailers, and you'll see more schools and churches and synagogues and parks. And what would you rather be doing? Helping someone light a Molotov cocktail or watch their kids while they get ice cream? we've gotten away from that. And in the future, I will get back to it. But for now, I'll leave it here. Hope you enjoyed it. Please sign up for the Patreon where next week's episode is already up, patreon.com/McFuture. Share this with others. Please review it on iTunes and do not miss next week's episode. It's all about how to conquer this world of weak allies. And it's a formula I put together on reciprocity. See you next week on the McFuture.